make a list of what are the key revenue drivers for your organization. What are the key things, processes that support those? And what are the key pieces of technology, vendors, people, sites, for example? And what you're going to have right there, and it sounds like not too data-y, right? But you have a network there. That's really important. And if you're able to attribute how critical those things are and also how much revenue those revenue generating services have, you have a prioritized list of all your internal assets, which can then give you really high level insights, even without doing something like data simulations. But it's going to prepare you for that. It's going to prepare you for AI use cases as well. And then if you do create a management process around that, it's going to grow with your business. And you're going to be able to see vulnerabilities, inefficiencies much easier, and the warning signs for large potential issues for your organization faster.
On this episode of the AI Grapple, I sit down with Davis DeRodes, Head of Data Science Innovation at Fusion Risk Management. Davis has a talent for taking complex data ideas and making them feel practical and clear, even if numbers are not your thing. We talk about the real role of data in building resilience and why every business, no matter the size, will need stronger systems to handle disruption in the coming years. Davis shares how AI-generated scenarios and recovery modelling help the world's biggest companies stay on their feet and offers simple steps any team can borrow to improve their own readiness. This is a grounded, eye-opening take on how data shapes the future of business and how you can start using it with confidence. Let's dive right in. Hi, Davis. Welcome to the AI Grapple. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Kate, for having me. A pleasure to meet you. Yeah.
Why don't we get started by you giving us a bit of your background? How did you get to be in the role and doing the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm head of data science innovation here at Fusion. Prior to this, I was director of data science at a startup that put tablets in grocery stores that ran human-centric stories and was kind of evaluating ad efficacy. But as I tell folks, data is everywhere, and the core principles that make any data product successful is probably generally true across any different industry. So when I first was looking into Fusion and joining the team, my early conversations were very interesting because I was looking for other data science professionals in the resilience industry. And honestly, there weren't too many or any at all. I still haven't really met that many at all. And so also with that and asking about our customers' data, which is a pretty nascent industry with regards to that. So it's been really incredible, the gains we've been able to have in the industry since I've been able to join with regards to the products that we have, but then also the way the industry talks about data and also AI. So it's been a really great journey so far, and I'm keep doing it, and really bright future for resilience, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, amazing. So you work at the intersection of AI, data science, and enterprise resilience, which I'm really interested to dig deeper into. But for our listeners who are not data scientists, and I am certainly not a data scientist, how do you explain the role that data actually plays in, well, I guess in AI, in business? Let's get right back to the brass tacks, the basics.
Yeah. That's a great question. So I think there's two fields that folks typically think of, and I kind of bring up them in juxtaposition to each other because I think folks refer to one a lot more than the other, and the other is actually what folks are mostly talking about. So there's data science, which is really using data, structured data or unstructured data, to be able to do scientific inquiry as to what is the actual, answer to a certain problem. So for example, you can use, A/B testing data from a medical trial to see if a drug is effective or not. Versus there's also decision science, which is really, a cousin of data science. You probably are going to use data to determine what type of decision you're going to make. You could also use other things like logic as well. But at the end of the day, it isn't scientifically proving anything. It's about, we got to make a decision, and we want to make a well-informed, good decision. And it might not be scientifically perfect or accurate, but it's going to be as close as we can get so we can feel confident what we're making. So I think a lot of folks in business in particular, they tend to think, much more in data science, but you see a lot of places actually brand what commonly is referred to as data science as their decision science department. So I will say decision science, I think, is probably what most folks think about in business, because at the end of the day, you're a business, you can't wait for, perfect scientific accuracy in some instances, and you just got to make a decision. So
can you tell us a bit more about a data scientist, what does your day-to-day look like? What kind of things are you working on? And then let's
Yeah.
dive into those a bit deeper.
So at Fusion, I definitely have an atypical schedule for a data scientist. So at other places, like I used to work at a very large American broadcasting corporation called NBC that does streaming and television stuff like that. And so when I was working there, I was really trying to do work on different problems like forecasting, for example. So how many people are going to watch your show, and what that involves is taking very large data sets, cleaning them, preparing them, working with different teams to understand the business problems they're looking to have answered, and then providing ideally products that will help them answer those questions and make good decisions. So, for example, I created like an explainability tool saying, hey, this is the forecast changed this much. Here is why. Here's the decisions you can make based off of that. So that's what a typical data scientist does. Really gets in the nitty gritty of how the data is structured and formatted, and then takes different modeling approaches based on the problem to be able to influence the decision and create value for an organization. At Fusion, because there isn't as much structure, right? The problems and the questions and even the data is really nascent and new. People really haven't taken a data science approach to this industry as a whole, really. I think since kind of Fusion has really taken a strong stance, they want to invest in it. And so really what I've been doing is a lot more customer interviews and talking with customers and industry professionals to figure out what are the problems, what are those nasty problems out there that are really hindering organizations from being resilient, and what are the ways that data science techniques can be used to actually do that, which, as you know, really means two things, right? It's very easy to apply an algorithm to a data set. That's not rocket science. Well, it's data science, but it's not crazy. The harder part is, what is the organizational transformation that has to be undergone to create valuable data that can then be used for those different things. So working a lot on that front as well with our customers, saying, what are the ways that we can get you having good, high quality data you can trust in to then be able to do future seeing data science, machine learning, simulation type of different things to be able to predict different things.
Yeah, I want to dive into that a bit deeper, but first I want to ask, I know one of the things that you've talked about doing is creating products that use AI generated scenarios and data simulations that help enterprises plan for the unexpected or for disruptions. So I'm fascinated by what that looks like. Like, can you walk us through sort of an example of how a scenario simulation works?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to take a step back too, because enterprise resilience, two words I think people understand what they mean on their face value, but what does it actually mean? It really is an evolution of a prior field called business continuity, which is really organizations being able to function through disruption. So whether things like CrowdStrike, for example, or even these really big cloud provider outages that happened recently, how can you as an organization keep delivering, generating revenue, supporting your customers, whatever it looks like, through those disruptions? So one thing that's kind of happened recently, we were discussing regulations before this, but a new set of regulations, particularly in the EU and UK, have really been mandating that the world's largest firms really take a look at their resilience and make sure that they are actually going to withstand certain disruptions that might happen in the future, particularly in the wake of COVID. Because I think a lot of folks saw that organizations that we really relied on for very important services were not really as resilient as we thought they were. And a big part of that is testing it, right? So being able to say, hey, if this bad, nasty scenario were to happen, how would our organization do? How would we do with that? And so I took a look at that as probably one of the first things at Fusion, interviewing, I think, over 100 customers. What are you doing today with regards to testing for specific scenarios? And a couple of really big problems came up. One, folks weren't being very creative. They were sticking to things that they felt really comfortable with and really weren't going above that. So AI obviously is a great tool for that, especially large language models, because especially when you're just looking for brainstorming your ideas, that's a great use case for that. So we're able to take information about your organization, different vulnerabilities you have, location of your assets, your people, things like that, to create really curated scenarios that are really going to stress your resilience. So things that, you might see a curated pre-list of scenarios that aren't really specifically tailored to you. This is really going to find your wounds and kind of rub salt in them, if you will. And so kind of a nasty metaphor, but so that's the first portion, right? Second portion is great. You've got your scenario, you've got the thing, the nasty thing you're going to go test for. How are you going to do that? Well, most folks do what's today called a tabletop. And the fun way I describe it to people is it's like Dungeons and Dragons for business. It's okay. Now your site is on fire. What do you do? Now it's been hit with dragons or something. That's ridiculous, but you just. And this takes a lot of time. It's really slow, not data driven at all. And I think like the average amount of money it's spent on just wasted man hours of people doing this instead of their day job is like between $100,000 and $200,000. And so instead of doing that, we can run Monte Carlo simulations using kind of like a Bayesian network technique, where essentially you have, hey, these are the things that are going to be hit by the nasty bugaboo. This is their probability of being disrupted, their probability of this happening in the first place. We're going to do some probability calculations, translate it through your business. And part of this also is folks need to be planning as to what they would do if certain things would happen. Let's take that information and use it also in the essence for those times. And we're going to cascade that all the way down to your revenue drivers, right? So great. So if this site in, Brisbane, Australia is impacted, how is that going to cascade through my business? Does that mean our online banking is going to be corrupted or our POS system is going to be impacted? A lot of organizations, they're pretty surprised when they actually run these simulations as to what parts of their business are impacted, even by small little disruptions. So the way my wife thinks about it is when CrowdStrike happened, a Starbucks online mobile order was impacted. And I was like, yeah, they could have figured that out if they used data simulation. So that's the way I describe it, though, is really two things: coming up with those great big ideas for what to go test, and then having data simulations actually reduce that kind of, man hours, but also create a really quantitative assessment for it. It's still important for people to get in a room, hash things out, but now you're boiling the ocean and you're able to say, hey, these are the scenarios that really matter.
I love that. And it's one of my favorite ways of using AI. And one of the things I think I'm most excited about for smaller to medium-sized organizations, because enterprise obviously invest money and time and the strategy in doing this work, but often smaller to medium organizations don't necessarily approach it with the same level of rigor, I guess. And AI is fantastic. I mean, I do it all the time. I go, okay, here's my plan. Tell me 5 reasons why this won't work. Or if this goes really, really wrong, what do I need to look out for? What could I do to then prevent what was going to go really, really wrong? And so that's, really accessible to anybody now using these large language models, is to do those scenario planning. And we used to do it a lot in crisis management with social media. We'd get them to come up with 10 scenarios, and it'd never be one of those 10 scenarios. It'd be the 11th that would happen, but they'd kind of worked their muscle on the planning for, so that when something did happen, they had certainly, done a lot of that thinking and documentation around what to do when things go wrong. So,
and that goes back to I can't remember if we were recording this portion or not, but to our data science versus decision science piece, where I think a lot of folks want to use AI, especially folks who really don't know about AI, in a very data science scientific capacity. And there's some emerging research as how you could potentially use large language models for problems like this, but really using it as a mirror to, what's the T in GPT stand for? Transformer, right? To actually transform information in a way that's reflective, brainstorming, challenging, questioning, where you still have a human in the loop, especially for emerging small size organizations, is massively beneficial. I could tell you that with just the use case you brought up is actually a product we offer, which is kind of AI plan guidance, right? So folks do their plan, right? And they have the AI say, hey, this is what's wrong with it. You should maybe consider making these changes. We saw that there's actually, this is an enterprise organization, so obviously scaled up, but they have a whole team of folks, right? And we were able to save them I think 3 or 5 months or something amount of time they spend on just reviewing those plans, which lets them become so much more resilient, so much quicker, and really also, bring that expert perspective to it. And really you're just having someone validate it and check it and have accountability for it.
Yeah. So when we look at data, and maybe pitch this more at the small to medium size organizations who are often our audience, what are the practical things that businesses can do right now with their data that will prepare them for and help them be resilient in this time of great change as AI gets introduced to every aspect of not just business but life? What are some of the ways that organizations should be approaching their data at the moment?
Yeah. So I'm going to take this from 2 angles. So first angle is just from, I often do this at Fusion. I have my data science hat, and I really want to get a hat that says data science. I don't have one right now.
I'm sure you
But
can.
sure I can, right? Put my data science hat on. So first, and this is true, I think, regardless of your size, is and especially for small and mid-size, because you haven't made probably as many bad decisions as the enterprise with regard to this, is data governance and data centralization. So as much as you can control how your data is being created, especially at point of engagement systems, having that normalization, that standardization is going to pay dividends for you as you go along. So I was employee, I think, number 11 at my prior job. It was a very small organization. And we prioritize that very heavily in our data strategy, where we were saying, hey, early on, we want to invest thoughtfully and carefully into our data governance to make sure not only are we getting high quality data, but that it's standardizable and actually usable and interpretable by not only AI, but humans who want to do reporting and checking on it. And the amount of time and efficiency they gave us long term was innumerable. So I really strongly recommend that for even if you're a smaller mid-sized organization, particularly nascents can be easier. But if you're existing for a while, your problems aren't as big. I would definitely invest in that data governance, normalization, standardization, and centralization. From a resilience standpoint, though, I think really fundamentally, even if you aren't using a fancy system like Fusion, for example, or I would say things like actually understanding how your business functions is really, really key. Really understanding, make a list of what are the key revenue drivers for your organization. What are the key things, processes that support those, and what are the key pieces of technology, vendors, people, sites, for example. And what you're going to have right there, and it sounds like not too data-y, right? But you have a network there. That's really important. If you're able to attribute how critical those things are, and also how much revenue those revenue generating services have, you have a prioritized list of all your internal assets, which can then give you really high level insights, even without doing something like data simulations. But it's going to prepare you for that. It's going to prepare you for AI use cases as well. And then if you do create a management process around that, it's going to grow with your business. And you're going to be able to see vulnerabilities, inefficiencies much easier, and the warning signs for large potential issues for your organization faster. And also say for your response time as well. So, for example, if, Azure had a big outage a couple weeks ago, right? If for example, what Azure supports in your organization, you can have really intelligent insights as to what customers are going to be mad at me or what revenue are we losing, for example, which is very, very powerful.
Yeah, and we started talking about, so just to break it down even further, the way that I teach this or work with businesses around this is thinking about, and we generally look at 3 areas. So there's sort of your knowledge files or your foundation data, which is, who you are, who you serve, how your business operates. And most of that doesn't change a lot. They're those core foundation bits of data that you can plug into AI or plug AI into that really aligns AI to the business. And then you've got your standard operating procedures, so things that happen that can be repeated over and over with the same outcome each time, that can be documented, and that's how you power your automations. And then we talk about playbooks or, more kind of guidelines that can be used by AI to guide them in a direction around the business. And one of the things we started talking about offline, which we decided to stop talking about and bring into the podcast, I've started working with organizations around building an AI operating system or a business brain, if you like, that sits outside of their normal operating system, which might be Microsoft, it might be the Google environment. And what I have been toying with, I guess, is a lot of enterprises, organizations are a bit frozen, particularly here in Australia. I'm not sure if it's the same in the US, but there's this fear about giving AI access to all their data. And so they only want to work in the Microsoft environment, or they only want to work in, if it's the Google environment, that happens to be better at the moment. But this concept of having something that sits outside of where all of their data is stored, so that you're consciously putting the data in that you want AI to have access to, suddenly frees up all of this creativity and different ways of using AI, because you can plug any platform in. And then when one becomes better than another, you can test that, because all of your operating system, everything that operates your business that is not your proprietary data, it's not your customer data, it's not your financials, it's not the things that you wouldn't want AI to have access to necessarily, it suddenly unlocks creativity and innovation in an organization. So I'm really interested in your thoughts on that, because this is, it's all still evolving for me around this. So I'm interested in your thoughts around that.
Yeah, but I think that's the main thesis of MCP, or Model Context Protocol. And I think it's a strong one also. I think it's going to be...
Just explain that for people who don't know what...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So MCP, I think it was made by Anthropic originally. But it basically lets you... It's like a standardized way for AI to interact with data effectively, and AI to interact with each other. And so when you have that standardized way, that lets you do the plug and play you're describing, right? You don't have to re-describe how a certain workflow works for your agent, for example, or instructions you give it. You can just swap it out using that same model context protocol. And so I think that's the long-term vision for that. I will say, though, that...
problem, can I just say on that, though, the problem with MCP, so I describe that to people as APIs, are what strings together multiple platforms in automations, which we've had for a long time. And it's kind of like the keys to the back door. It lets these platforms communicate and plug into other bits of data. MCP is really like giving AI the keys to the front door. And when you start talking about that, because it's allowing AI to log into platforms as you, and there's actually some real risk around that. And when you start talking about it from that perspective, a lot of enterprises are like, well, hang on, now we've got AI browsers, the browsers we've always been using. So now AI can actually see what our staff are doing in their internet browsers, logging into platforms. So that actually opens up a whole different conversation around giving AI access to things.
And I think it's the same challenge that enterprise SaaS also has run into as well. So something we deal with on a daily basis, right, is that we go through these AI governance review boards, where we have to essentially kind of go through and show this is the data we have access to, this is the data we don't have access to. And it's this whole walled gardens concept. I think it's just kind of be revisiting again as to what's being siloed off and what's not. Which goes back to my original kind of data governance comment, but you're totally right, though. It's very much deeper, especially for the systems of engagement. So I think the AI browser example you just brought up is very, very key as well. I think the other piece as well, the earlier comment you made, I just want to go back to briefly about this kind of centralization of data information. I think there's an interesting debate being had right now on unstructured versus structured data, and the importance of, is it worth the time to essentially structure data from unstructured? And as of right now, and I think it's going to be true for a while, I do believe structured data is still going to be existing in the post-LLM world. And I think that's still valuable for you to do that, mostly because of data governance. And I think that being understood in language is hard for people, for everyone. And so if we're still relying on language being that encoder of data and information, that having structure applied to that is going to make it understandable for anyone. How many times have we written an email or sent a comment that was misconstrued, right? And without that structure, they're going to keep running those problems, no matter how smart the AI is. I think we're still running those problems. So that was just a small comment also I wanted to make for also small and mid-sized organizations that are considering, options like, hey, let me dump a ton of documents into an embeddings database, which again, still really great, get that chat functionality working and the RAG going. But I do want to suggest, it's my 2 cents, my point of view, right, that the structured data approach is still going to be valuable in the future as well. And you should be thinking about that as well, just as a way to make sure you're understood.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a real difference between your people using generative AI tools off the shelf to access your systems and access your data, as opposed to custom build or things that are being built within, say, the Microsoft environment for specific use cases. So,
yeah, but then on the MCP as well, I think it is something that folks are going to have to grapple with. But I'd almost treat it also as 2 things. 1, re-envisioning how your employees engage with your existing systems, but then also 2, I think also treating AI as an employee. And almost like a department, maybe is a better way to think of it. And we've been thinking agents as employees, but then who has access to what? What's their permissioning? I think you're going to have to really treat it like a workforce with identity and access management. And it's going to be tricky too, because if you give those identity access management controls to the AI itself, right? Two AIs can have a conversation and convince someone to give, just like I can, if I'm buddy with a security person, they might give me access to something I shouldn't have access to. I think it runs into similar problems with that as well.
Well, and that's one area where Microsoft has made real gains. They've now got the ability to give agents email addresses and employee numbers, and they've got the whole flight dashboard thing where you can see exactly how many agents you've got and who's using them and turn access on and off. So we're certainly moving quickly down that path, but I'm not sure that, and it sounds like the work that you're doing is really critical to helping enterprises, go through that, because it's a massive disruption to the way that work's always been done, to start thinking about, collaborating with and working alongside AI agents.
I'm sure we've had this conversation a bunch of times on this podcast already, but I think the question of what it means to do work is also very much in question. And again, I think it just as a metaphor for my kind of career so far, is that my prior role was way more focused on actual modeling and coding and actual statistical work. That a lot of it, Cursor crushes that. So we were talking about his favorite AI tools. I no longer need to spend an afternoon coding up a new model doing data transformation. I can just have a quick conversation with Cursor. But I think a product and at minimum a value version of whatever work you're doing, even if it is very technical like coding, I think is always going to seize the day. That's what I've really learned too, is that, for an industry that doesn't have a lot of very nascent in its data journey and very, very nascent in its data science journey, just having that mindset of that, where that value is, I think is always going to be valuable.
Yeah, and I think you just touched on it then, but one of the other things that excites me so much about AI is the ability to repurpose data or revisualize data in lots of different formats. I mean, I've just been doing some work this morning in Notebook LM where I've taken really dense reports and in a matter of 90 seconds created these amazing infographics and slide decks that suddenly unlock, this really dense information into something that's really easy for people to engage with and digest. And I was listening to a podcast this morning, and I won't be able to attribute who it was that said it, but someone was talking about demos, not memos. We need to stop doing written memos to, out to our people in business, but to really start using the technology that's available to visualize things in different ways and make it far more personalized and accessible for people.
Oh, absolutely. And two notes on. So one, back to my earlier comment, what you just says, I completely agree with, is that being understood, even if it's still unstructured, is still very valuable, right? But one product that we released was one of Fast Money's most exciting things this year, was BC Plan and Fusion. And so in our industry, those plans that folks make, typically for a lot of folks, is just a massive document, and they list off every bad thing that could happen to this business process. All the people associated, where they need to go in case of emergency, stuff like that. Really, really dense, terrible to maintain, very hard to report on. And so we made an AI product that basically takes all the data out of there, scrapes it, matches it to our schema, without using things like traditional document ingestion techniques, using generative AI. So it could be dynamic to your custom schema. You don't have to do any pre-training on it. You just throw it in there and extracts it. And what we've seen is between 70 to 80% accuracy, which has been really great. And especially for folks, who are trying to get the stuff in the system, even if it isn't 100% perfect or they're not totally wed to it if it's out of date anyways, it's been a really, really great success story for them. But with that, though, having that structured format lets them be dynamic, lets the AI more easily give feedback, query, give you test it, run simulations against it, things like that. So, and the other thing too is another thing we've been doing a lot is way more quick prototypes, which has been fantastic. So we use another tool called UX Pilot that can actually spit out wireframes in HTML using our platform's tech stack, which is Salesforce. And I can give it to Cursor. Instead of doing a wireframe and having a meeting with someone, I can literally generate a POC and say, hey, what do you guys think of this POC? Take a look at the link here. And then it just lets us iterate so much faster, get so much better feedback from our customers, and move a lot faster as well.
Yeah, the ability to whip up an app or a website now is incredible. I've never written a line of code in my life, and I'm definitely a front-end user of this technology, not a developer, not a coder. But the fact that I can create little apps for my team when we're doing repeatable tasks, and I just create this little app for them that does it for them now is mind blowing to me. Still, it's and I think it's one of the things I encourage our listeners to. If it's not something you've had a go at, Google AI Studio now, you can literally go in and just with a few lines, you can describe the app or the website that you want to build, and it'll whip that up for you in a matter of minutes. So
yeah, one of our product manager, he's our VP of BC product management, man named David Halford. He's a veteran of the industry, and he'd never written a line of code of his entire life, and he's whipping up things. He doesn't know anything about coding whatsoever. He actually calls his AI Lizzie, and so he's like, I was talking to Lizzie last night, and she came up with this. And so yeah, trust me, if you've never written a line of code, honestly, you might actually be better at it. I've seen a lot of actual technical coders really struggle to just talk to it simply and straightforward.
Yeah. And now that you can literally just click the microphone and you can just say what you want, it's literally like having a conversation. You just go, this is what I want. And then it builds it. It's still mind blowing to me. So, Davis, one of the things that I think every business, every person needs to be focused on right now is how are we going to fasten our seatbelt during this time? How are we going to have that resilience? Because as much as I'm an AI optimist, it is going to be a pretty bumpy ride for the next few years. A lot is going to change. There will be a lot of disruption. How people cope with that disruption will kind of dictate how smoothly or painfully we go through this next stage. But what are some tangible things that, particularly more at that smaller to medium-sized business, what are some tangible things that they can be doing right now to remain resilient through this time, particularly around their data?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with there was a really great study that Boston Consulting Group did after the COVID pandemic, comparing resilient organizations versus non-resilient organizations. And what they were able to show was that resilient organizations were able to be disrupted for less time and also able to bounce back faster and actually come back stronger, actually perform at a higher level. And so I think the first thing, it sounds not really data related too much, but I think it's definitely very important, is to be not only have hope, but to value resilience. That this disruption is coming, you can get ahead of it, you can be prepared for it. And I truly believe, first of all, from an enterprise resilience standpoint, that being able to plan, get ahead, understand your business, I think is incredibly beneficial. And there's very meaningful ROI there to be able to understand how your organization operates and be able to anticipate these challenges. From a data standpoint, I think there's going to be increasing pressure across the board to move away from intermediary systems and really focus on point of engagement systems. So if you're a small or medium-sized organization, I really encourage you to think about that. Where are the places where your revenue's coming in, right? Maybe you should be tracking that data in someplace centralized. Maybe where are your employees logging into their systems? If you have some type of identity management system, maybe you should be tracking that, or kind of where that is, centralize it. By doing those different types of things, you can have really robust data set for AI, machine learning, whatever, to tell you, hey, these are the things people are logging in the most to, and these are the ones that drive the most revenue, and tells a full story just right there. So again, it kind of goes back to that data governance and data centralization piece I mentioned before. But really thinking about how to get really high quality data that you don't have to spend a lot of time maintaining. And so really those source of engagement systems that we're really looking to expand more and more to with our customers, I think is really, really valuable. And if you don't have that, that's okay. Human created data is still pretty good, probably take you a little bit more time, but just thinking strategically about how are we going to create sustainable, high quality data, I think is a very interesting thing for no matter what size organization you are. And I know it sounds scary too, but it is really key card logins, for example. Where's that data coming from, right? If you have a site, for example, just really tactical, small things like that, almost IoT type things can be really helpful for not only resilience, but also I think the future as well.
One of my favorite websites is Kaggle, which has all of the synthetic data sets. So if you want to test something, you don't need to use your own data. You can actually just go and grab a data set that's been created in just about every industry and every scenario, and use that data. But we didn't have this on our list of things to talk about, but it's just fired in my brain. This issue around data and AI. I'm interested in your perspective on, because they say that AI has pretty much trained on every bit of data that is available in the world now, whether it's publicly available data, a lot of not publicly available data, and there's plenty of lawsuits happening around that. Plenty going on around that. But this concept of creating that we now need to create synthetic data to keep training AI, and that loop of what happens if something goes wrong in that process. So AI is now training AI. What happens to that data? Can you talk to us a bit about that? Because it's something I'm quite interested in.
Definitely. So I think the number one concern, well, there's two things. One, synthetic data is typically used when there are kind of gaps in your data set and makes a reasonable assumption as to what those gaps might look like. And so when they've trained on the full history of the internet, right, and they want to train further and kind of smooth that out, they'll create that synthetic data, but it's really based on the existing data you have and really just kind of expanding that further. If you do kind of, take shots in the dark, you're just creating additional noise and chaos, and you're not actually improving the actual signal of your data. So really, it's just almost enhancing kind of that body there. I think what's going to be really important, and back to that walled gardens conversation we had earlier, is the polluting of the internet, which is already going on. Especially if you go on any social media platform, you can see the pollution right in front of our eyes. And I think the importance of having high quality secured off data is going to be incredibly more and more important. And it's probably why a lot of organizations are thinking that way, as to, hey, I don't want my information becoming, first of all, available to everyone. They can have it for free. But then on top of that as well, that I don't want to get polluted as well, especially if I let data enter my system from bad places. So yeah, overall, I think that's incredibly important. But I don't want to overstate the value of synthetic data. I think alternatively, and so this is kind of what we do with the data simulations, for example, I think simulation is a vastly underutilized approach to problems. And so as an example, so our data simulations, these are for disasters that might have never happened, right? Almost inherently have never happened, because these are catastrophic things that could really bring a company down to its knees, right? These aren't just the power went out for an hour, right? These are you're without power for a week, for example. And
that happens here in Brisbane with some of the storms we've been having lately. Hail this size, and whole business has been wiped
It's happened at different places, right? But to my knowledge, it really hasn't happened like in Atlanta in quite a while. I mean, it hasn't happened to your organization. And so really it's about being transparent about how the data is being created. And it's very important is model explainability in the future, especially with AI, as to how it came to that understanding. Now, very unfortunately, with machine learning models and obviously LLMs being part of that, very much a black box, right? It's very much how'd you come up with that? It's very hard to understand that, but being transparent is how you're simulating that information can be very valuable, because that's all it is. Models are really just stacked assumptions on top of each other. And so being transparent and also clear and easy to understand what those assumptions are, I think there's a lot of value to be had there as well. So did that answer your question? I feel like I'm not sure if it did exactly, but
yeah, it answered some other questions. I mean, two of my favorite custom GPTs that I built quite early on around simulations were, one was the Shark Tank, so training it to act as the Shark Tank judges or the investors.
That's fun.
So that when you put an idea in, they attack it, tear it down, tell you why it's not going to work, or give you good feedback if it is. And the other is customer focus groups. So training it on your target demographic and actually running a simulated customer focus group. So you put a product in and have them all talk about it and whether it meets their challenges and their pain points or not from a marketing perspective. So you can do a lot of fun things, very low cost. If you're a smaller business, you can create a lot of those simulation style things in GEMs or custom GPTs really easily.
Oh, absolutely. And I've done a bunch of those as well. I've done a patent generator. So we have a burgeoning patent program that I was able to start up, and really easy just to be like, hey, this is my napkin. Can you turn into a formal application for me to send to our patent lawyer? And then a funnier one is our CTO has a very strong personality. And I think at some point or another, we've made a Corey GPT and just we put like his Slack messages in there. So, if you ever want his thoughts on something and he's busy, right, you can just ask the GPT and get a ballpark pretty correct answer as to what you're going to get. So
I've got one last thing again that's not on our list, but that is something I'm really interested in around data too. I think there's going to be a whole emerging industry around companies that have not been data companies historically, but are becoming data companies because we need fresh and new data to train these models. So I know Uber is, paying Uber drivers $1 per training task, that in between jobs, they can take photos of things or they can do AI training. And so Uber is creating these huge data sets that they can sell to other companies, which is not something that, they're becoming a data company, which is not what they were originally. Is that something that you see a lot more of is going to happen? Companies figuring out how to commoditize their data, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was happening before, but this has really turbocharged it because I think companies in the past could rely on different moats of their product base that they can't no longer. I forgot who said it. It might have been, I want to attribute the wrong person, but the sentiment was that the only differentiator you're going to have in the future is your data and the models you create from that data. That anything about your product can be easily recreated. Your customer base can be stolen from you because the product can be surpassed by AI potentially based on marketing and market fit. And that's going to be pretty much a fist fight at that point. And really all you have is your data and your modeling. So that makes complete sense. We're definitely viewing it that way from our strategy in particular. We're really working with our customers to create first party data. But I will say, because people are so sensitive with their data, it's going to be a big challenge, especially if you are, a product focused company or a B2B company. One element I do want to throw out that we're also looking at as well, that's a different model that I think is going to happen a lot more, is data collaboration. And so I know this is a future question you had, which is like, what does the future look like? But at least in our industry, something that's really exciting that we're seeing the future of is what we're calling ecosystem resilience, which is the thought that everyone anonymized, federated, and safely can share their data. We can use AI and data science to be able to model these scenarios, not just about how it affects your organization by itself, but because everyone relies on each other, how that looks like as an ecosystem, and get much more accurate results and find much more accurate decisions. And the thing about resilience too is that it's a really interesting field and industry because it brings a lot of competitors together. That particularly in financial services, all these companies, obviously they're trying to get your business, especially with retail banking, but in a lot of ways, they're very collaborative. They loan money to each other, they do deals with each other, and they also want a strong economy that's thriving and moving upward. And so I can go back to 2008, 2009, right, when Lehman Brothers collapsed. Like, there weren't many banks who were joyously celebrating the fall of one of their competitors, right? They're like, they just completely collapsed. It's bad for the industry and it's bad for the economy. And so really, I think there's been more and more opportunities for people to securely share their data to do AI and ML. And I think those who facilitate that make it audible and kind of have a trust layer installed. Also, that's another model that's going to be able to work as well, to be able to facilitate that coming together of information.
Yeah, and I mean, we're seeing collaboration in ways that we've never seen it before. I mean, Apple and Google and, even the big companies are collaborating, in ways they haven't before.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think in a lot of places, for the big folks, they have to, but for smaller folks, right, it's very much a prisoner's dilemma. And you need like a UN of some sort to be able to come in and say, hey, no one's being ripped off here. No one's learning anything they shouldn't learn here. And you can put AI in the middle of that for sure, but you obviously want a human neck to choke if something goes wrong. So
Yeah, and a lot of the work we're doing at the moment is with industry bodies or peak bodies who are looking at how can they use AI to drive collaboration and to drive that innovation across a whole industry as opposed to just with individual businesses within that industry. So it's certainly an interesting time. So Davis, as we start to wrap up, and it's often my final question, as you stand on the hill and look out into the future, if we get this right, if companies and businesses really get their data right and get their approach to AI right, what does our future look like? What does it look like if we get it right?
yeah, I think the question is also, was it get it right look like? I think, and it was funny you mentioned social media earlier, and I'm not sure if and I'm spitballing a little bit here, so we'll see how it goes. But I like the notion of companies, people having the ability to control what information they share and what information they don't share, and with that shared information, creating a environment where it can do the better for society. I used to do a bit of game theory, and the classic prisoner's dilemma, the classic collaboration problem is very hard to overcome. And so if we're able to create data governance, data privacy, data sharing protocols that are respectful of what people actually want, while also not poisoning our wells with AI slop in those shared spaces, I think there's incredible benefit to really change work as we know it, and industries as we know it. And I know a lot of people think, oh, that means I'm going to lose my job. I don't believe that. I really do believe that. I forgot what the famous principle is, but that you're going to just be doing something else, that people never go out of business. And that's going to change. That at the end of the day, we will always have an advantage over AI because we're people, we're fallible. Unlike AI, which will be less and less fallible as time goes along. But I will say for the resilience industry in particular, I really do see it as long term, the world becoming more resilient through collaboration. Because I think we're already seeing it where the disruptions that we're facing are larger and larger. The mistakes are being made are larger and larger. The world's becoming more chaotic. At the minimum, the climate's drastically changing, right? We have civil unrest and political uprisings, everywhere, and war in several locations. And so I think that's just unfortunately going to continue for a bit. And so we really hope that our largest organizations that can really do better and also keep the world resilient and safe. So that's the goal, that's the dream. And really, it's working together and sharing information. So
it's great to hear that from a data scientist. And thank you so much for making what is often a challenging topic for people to get their head around, I think, because, I'm not a data person. And so I hear the word data and I, glaze over a little bit, but I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think you've made it really practical for people. So thank you so much for your time today. How can people connect with you and find out more about Fusion if they're interested in your work?
Yeah, feel free to follow me or add me on LinkedIn. I generally always accept as long as you're not AI. I'll be the judge of that. And then definitely go to Fusion on LinkedIn or also on our website as well. Especially if you're interested in enterprise resilience, making your company more resilient, give us a line. We love talking to y'all. And again, one thing I really love about Fusion is our customer community is just absolutely incredible. And so if you are first starting off, we have a really great network of small, mid-sized organizations that can absolutely give you some pointers and some tips on starting your resilience journey, along with our practitioners as well that we have in-house. So yeah, so us on LinkedIn, us on our website, find me on LinkedIn. I'm in Atlanta, so if you want to hang out, let me know. I don't know.
Great, Davis. Well, yes, I'd pop over for a cuppa, but it's a little bit far.
It's a little bit far, yeah.
A little bit far.
It's weird that you're warmer than me because normally Atlanta is just about as hot as anywhere, but no, because we've got the different seasons going on right now. So
Brisbane's hot in summer.
I'm jealous.
Thank you so much, Davis. We'll include all of those links in our show notes, and I've really, really appreciated our conversation today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the AI Grapple. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We would love to hear your thoughts, so reach out with any questions or comments about the show. Until next time, keep grappling with AI and stay curious.